The Kootenai Faith Fest is coming up June 21st to 23rd, hosted by Nelson United Church in Nelson, BC. The overall goal of the Faith Fest is to get people together, to have a singing and dancing and praying all together. We will be lifting up a quote from Hebrews 11, verse 1. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. The weekend will be headlined and keynoted by Carol Howard Merritt. Carol will be with us in person, and we had the chance to catch up with her from Chattanooga, Tennessee, where she lives, in the lead up to our Faith Fest. Well, Carol, some of our viewers, I suppose, won't know that much about you, so I'll start with a bit of a bio, and I've taken some of this from your website and then from other pieces that I've put together. But Carol, you're a pastor, a parent, and a partner. You're an award-winning and acclaimed writer with print works including Tribal Church, Ministering to the Missing Generation, Reframing Hope, Vital Ministry in a New Generation. And in 2017, you published Healing Spiritual Wounds, Reconnecting with a Loving God After Experiencing a Hurtful Church. And Carol also writes for the Christian Century as a blogger there with regular offerings. And I just learned this, that you're an adjunct faculty member at Dubuque Theological Seminary.
Yes.
Cool. And so you co-hosted the God Complex Radio, and I just listened to an episode of that over the weekend, which was excellent. And you founded and host UNCO, an open space unconference that pulls from multiple denominations and generations. Very cool. And you served as a pastor in the swamps of Cajun, Louisiana, Bayside Village in Rhode Island, and an urban neighborhood of Washington, D.C. But as we learned in Healing Spiritual Wounds, we were actually raised Baptist in a household and tradition that left some wounds, which is the focus of that book, of course. And I have no doubt that you will soon add the Kootenai Faith Fest to your list of major contributions on your bio.
Absolutely.
So we're delighted that you'll be joining us there in 10 days from today's interview. And and so thanks again so much for making the time today.
I'm thrilled to be here, and I can't wait to visit the area.
Great. Carol, I've in looking over your list of accomplishments and contributions and the ways in which you've put yourself out there, especially in Healing Spiritual Wounds, but otherwise too, I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about why are you putting all this work into this? I mean, what does it mean to you personally? But also, what's at stake for our society or societies these days to make sure that churches are loving and caring places?
You know, it was interesting. I mean, it started out as I wanted to write a book, and I was trying to figure out what I had to offer the world, and I knew that I didn't really have a lot of those credentials that you needed to write a book. I didn't have a mega church, and I wasn't, I didn't have a PhD or anything like that. But what I did have was I had grown churches, not in a mega church way, but, steadily grown churches. And they were often churches that were people who were attracting young adults, so people in their 20s and 30s, and as you look at statistics, you can see that that's often the prime area, right? I mean, everybody wants those young families to come in. So I began to reflect on like what we were doing right and what we were doing wrong, and part of it was a little bit of just a love letter to the church of, I was young at the time. And so part of it was just like, this is what's going on, this is what's going on in our lives. And this is why we're not going to church. And so I wrote my first book, and then, I wrote a second book to kind of address the generational issues that were happening with the digital divide at the time. I mean, at that moment in history, people didn't trust Facebook and church, and which might have been a good thing, right?
Time is now, decades ago in digital life, right?
Yeah, right. So, but a little bit of it was like how to explain postmodernism and the change that was happening with the digital media, the interwebs. Just kidding. Um, so, so I was writing about that, and then so I felt like I was having these sort of practical solutions to problems that were deeper. When you're asking the question, well, why are younger generations not going to church, or why is and this is what the church was asking, why aren't my kids going to church, what's going on, what's going to happen to our institutions? And so I felt like I was giving all these like sociological and practical answers to that question. And then I just had to come to the point where it was like, well, there's all of these adaptive solutions that we can have, but then there's also this really deeper thing going on, and that is a lot of people have been really hurt by the church. And so my third book is sort of wrestling with that. How do we pastor in a time when so many people have been raised with misogyny and white supremacy, and have been raised in the midst of so much hatred, and often it is hatred that the church has promoted. So and I found myself working in a lot of places where we had where there were pedophile priests, and so had to sort of really dig into some of the trauma that's been going on within our church communities. So that's what my third book is about. Just healing spiritual wounds. How do we work through this stuff?
And when people ask the question, why don't my children who are grown adults now, why don't they go to church? Often there are good reasons for why they don't go to church. And it's either the wounds that they've experienced themselves, or the people they love and care about who might identify as LGBTQ2I or whatever, their friends have been deeply injured by design in some ways too.
Absolutely. And so, we oftentimes, as church professionals, we like to just sort of throw shade on younger generations for not being as committed and loyal and as whatever. But we've got some work to do, before people will trust us. And we just have to begin to look deep into ourselves, and to be open to the ways in which people have been hurt by congregations and by denominations.
So if the intention is to help to heal those wounds and thereby lead to a healthy, sustaining church, you touch on this in your first two books for sure, and in your third book too, and more recently in some of your blog posts. But fast forward almost 10 years, the political landscape in the US and elsewhere has changed a lot. So why is it so important for there to be this church, this body of Christ, in a world that does all sorts of terrible things to bodies?
Yeah.
What's happening here?
Yeah, I mean, there are some people who have been wounded so much that they can't go back to church. And I definitely respect and appreciate that. But at the same time, there is this longing for a lot of people to be part of spiritual community. And even if it doesn't look exactly the way that it has in the past, we have to acknowledge this longing. We have to acknowledge the yearning that's happening. And even when you look at atheist blogs or agnostic writing, so much of that longing is there. And so I just think that there are certain people who are wired in a spiritual way. You know, their brains work that way. And so I believe that the best way that we can be human together is if you are wired that way in particular, you know, if we can come together as a body and try to strive to be as you know, as loving and as whole and as human as we possibly can be. And so that's my hope, you know. I mean, it just feels like sometimes it feels like when you're part of especially online conversations, and people will say, oh, let's get rid of church altogether, let's get rid of it completely, and then the next moment they're saying, hey, let's all get together and talk about how we're going to get rid of church completely, you know. And you just see this happening sort of over and over again in different iterations. And you know, for me, I'm like, well, you know, I am part of this thing called church, and I know that it can be toxic, and I know it can be horrible, but on the other hand, it's also been incredibly healing. And it's the place that I've learned how to pray and meditate and live with one another. And I've learned how to forgive people. And I'm every single day being challenged to feed the community and to reach out and love in different ways. So, and there's nothing else in my life where I am actually being challenged to do those things. So, you know, I think if I ever got to the place where I wanted to just give up on church, I would probably be that person. And I would say, hey, let's all get together and talk about how we're going to give up on church. You know?
It's just another way of doing church, right? And being together and gathering like that, talking about these things. It might not be the same doctrines associated, but it's still a form of religion. You'll have your rituals and you'll have your music and you'll have your gathering.
Exactly. So, you know, I guess I'd rather just pull on that wisdom and the tradition and the beauty and the art and the resources that we have moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and British Columbia was the province with the highest proportion of spiritual but not religious for a long time. It probably still is. And you'll see this when you come to the Kootenays. You know, it's a bit, where we are is a bit of a mecca for skiing and mountain biking and hiking and just getting away, right? And it's great. And many people will say, well, that's where I find God. And I couldn't agree more with that. I do too. But there's some things that don't happen for me when I'm on my mountain bike. Like, I'm not being held accountable to my community, or I'm not holding my community to be accountable to be more loving. We're not overcoming the polarities that are growing in our communities when I'm just blissed out on my skis, right? There's something about being together with some kind of structured institution that can actually help us support each other in mending our communities and ourselves.
I know. I'm like part of this. I'm pastoring this congregation, and it's really, really tiny. It's like this, you know, temporary part-time job, and it's this tiny little church. We have a handful of people who show up on Sunday mornings, and they feed over 1,000 people in the community. And you know, it's like, well, I can't do that alone on my mountain bike. You know, I can't come together and feed 1,000 people when I'm practicing private and personal spirituality. I will say I'm not, you know, I love Nadia Bowles-Weber, and she's a good friend, and she'll say things like, I'm religious but not spiritual. Or Lillian Daniels as well is also a good friend who says that. And I do actually understand people who have a difficult time going to church. You know, I do understand that. And you can't help but feel awe and beauty and amazement in this world. So, I go both ways. I think they can work together.
For
Yeah.
sure, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, when I first arrived at my present charge, I told them I don't have visions of filling these pews again. I don't see a burgeoning Sunday school. I'm not sure that that was all that great, really. If in the height of Christendom, when people just went to church because it was a social obligation, I don't think we were any further ahead than when we have largely empty sanctuaries without children in them.
Yeah, I mean, people are there for a reason. You
Yeah.
know that they had 1,000 other things that they could have done, and there wasn't anything compelling them to go. There wasn't this incredible like social pressure that they had to show up and smile and look pretty on Sunday morning. They're there because there's something within them that compelled them to be there. So I actually if I had the choice, I kind of like it now. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And there's a level of um, commitment and intentionality. It's not, no one's there by accident, I would say.
Right, right.
Can we talk a little bit about the role of technology? You and I are, I should have estimated this, but thousands of miles apart, connecting in real time, and which is wonderful. And our church has a website, which we don't update as often as I'd like to. We have a Facebook page, which is fun and friendly and has some role of connecting people. And I'm also aware that a lot of these social media can be such lightning rods and cause polarity, even when it's not intended. Even though when you get those same two people who are bickering endlessly over Twitter together, they actually agree and can care about each other. But when it comes to just the words on the screen, those words are fierce and divisive. So, how have you seen churches succeed in embracing the technologies, either new technologies or old technologies, or maybe technologies that are still to come?
Yeah, it's really fascinating how all of this has evolved over the years. I see churches doing it well. Many times, new congregations, when when they talk about starting new congregations, pastors always say that social media is the number one outreach tool that they use. I mean, it's the main outreach tool. And I know when my husband started a new church here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, that's what he used. He was constantly on Facebook, constantly, sending out invites and on Twitter and, trying to drum up drama and excitement and and it worked. He was able to uh, you know have this great community of mostly activists and people of faith, artists, activists, and people of faith, and so I see it as an incredible tool. It's just a great tool. The problem with it is all algorithms. They they reward bad behavior, right? Yeah, I mean, the way to grow a presence is to attack, and and the people who design these platforms are very aware of that. They understand that, and so there are ways in which I believe that manipulated to be kind of awful people. So, I mean, part of me looks at this theologically, and I believe that there's some beauty in face-to-face interaction. There is something that's just there, and theologically, I imagine, well, maybe that's the image of God, right? When I can see you face to face, I know that there is the Imago Dei in play, right? But don't think I'm a Luddite. Like I'm on Twitter way too much, and yeah, so. Uh, but I believe that as churches, we just have to be involved as pastors. We just have to be involved so that we can make those criticisms, so that we can understand what's happening in our own self, in our interactions. There needs to be, we need to be able to interact well, and be able to show people how to do that, how to interact with kindness and love, and try not to build our platform. I mean, it's hard because it happens. Like sometimes I don't even mean to be doing it. I just like get annoyed about something, and I'll put something in on Twitter, and like then the next thing I know, major news companies are calling me up, asking me about certain people, or so I get caught in the trap. I'm not uh, completely innocent in all of this. But if we can learn to be able to respond well, while also, trying to be the best prophetic witness that we can alongside that, it's an art, right? It's just an art. So I said we have to all be on it, but we don't all have to be on it. And for some people, it is really damaging for their mental health. And I think we're beginning to understand that in new and different ways. So we have to be careful with it. But those who enjoy it and those who can be on it, I think should be.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think about it all?
Yeah, I go back and forth all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I know. I'm like, let's burn down Facebook. I don't want anything to do with it.
yeah, exactly. But Facebook is how we all imagined the internet to be when it became popularized, right? It's like, oh wow, we
Right.
can make these events and invite people and have these different conversations, and I think you're right. The nuances in the algorithm, and I wonder if there's a way to develop like antidotes or strategies to deal with those algorithms. Like if there's a way to perceive in myself, like, oh, my dopamine is rising at a rate that I don't like here, or I do like, but I shouldn't. So is there a way that I can disengage from this just for a moment, let my hormones cool down, and then respond lovingly? I mean, there's all sorts of things that we could do, I suppose, but do you have anything that you use?
Yeah, I mean, Jaron Lanier wrote a book on this, and it was really, really helpful for me. I can't think of the name of it at this moment, but it was incredibly helpful just to understand the depth at which we are being manipulated. Just understanding exactly, like, wow, we really are being manipulated at in really strong ways. So I think number one, having that level of awareness of how exactly they are, they're toying with our heads, and then just being able to turn the phone off, turn the computer off, go take that walk in the woods, make sure that we are disconnected in certain ways. And again, the other side is there are a lot of people who wouldn't be connected if it weren't for the internet. So there's so much beauty to it, and so many relationships and friendships that I have that I never would have had before. But just always being aware of how we manipulate and how we are being manipulated, I think is important.
Yeah, there's a certain ableism in saying, "Oh, all social media should be banned" or whatever, right? And that's actually the main connection point for a lot of people with mobility challenges, especially.
Exactly.
It reminds me of a friend of mine who has cerebral palsy, and she is pretty upset about the straw bans that are going on because she really depends on having a straw. And so
Right.
sometimes when someone like me gets up on a soapbox to say, "Thou shalt not do whatever," it tends to be ableist or exclusionary
Yeah.
in some way. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
super
Yeah.
important.
I know a lot of people who can connect on the internet when they can't connect
Yeah,
in real life all the time.
yeah, yeah. This twigs one of your stories in Healing Spiritual Wounds, which was Sue, who is an elder, both in terms of age and stage in life, but also in her role in the church, and has multiple sclerosis. And you came to quote unquote help her when maybe you think it was the opposite. She was helping you, maybe both. That's how relationships work, right? And maybe this is a personal question, but I wonder what it was like for you, because it seems to me that she might have been the first kind of fierce woman that you encountered on your spiritual journey, who showed you a different way for a woman to be in relationship to a church and to God. Am I right in that? And what was the significance of that relationship?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, my mom is definitely fierce. She's definitely always found a way to minister, and it's really interesting because I do come from a line of pastors, but they're all, Baptist minister or Baptist women um, who minister with mentally challenged people, or a Pentecostal. I had a real actually charismatic grandma who was the prophetess of her church, and so every time she would speak, everybody would be quiet, even though their church didn't really believe that women could be ministers. So it's sort of fascinating that I have been on this spiritual journey with these women who who have gone ahead of me in their own ways, even though they don't believe in ordination, even though they believe that wives should submit to their husbands. But yes, I met this woman named Sue and went in to help her. She was paraplegic. She was becoming quadriplegic, and I went in to help her with her taxes and running errands and little things for her. And Sue was just fabulous. She was just an amazing person. And I was going to a Bible college at the time, a very fundamentalist Bible college. I was also raised Southern Baptist. And so, I was frustrated and had this call that was starting to blossom within me, and I was constantly being told, no, you're not allowed to do that, you're not allowed to do that because of my gender. And so I would go in and talk to Sue, and Sue was, this kind of radical feminist who just thought this was absurd. And she was a Presbyterian elder, and she would just laugh at me. And I think it was the perfect response, because I think if she had gotten angry, then I would have gotten defensive, or if she would have gotten, if she would have ignored me, I would have never known there was another way. But because she laughed at me, it was fantastic. I could just sort of have this sense of distance from my situation, and I could laugh at it as well. So this had an incredible impact on me, just coming in contact with somebody who didn't take herself so seriously. She didn't take me so seriously, and yet she was very, very committed to the women flourishing in ministry. So she would do things like, a nurse would come in the room and she would say, "Oh, this is my friend Carol. She's going to seminary." And I wasn't going to seminary, but eventually I did.
Yeah.
So I have 6% of battery. I'm gonna run and grab my my plug, if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure, and I'll let you go soon too. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry, my answers have been very long. If you want me to shorten them, just
No,
let
this
me
is
know.
great. This is great.
I'm getting the warnings.
Oh yes.
I will go to sleep soon. Okay.
Okay, so I have two. Oh gosh, I have a bunch of different questions for you. Maybe I'll save some of these for when we're in person.
All right.
Um,
Sounds good.
All right. So maybe we'll just wind down. So you're going to be with us at the Kootenai Faith Fest, June 21st to 23rd in Nelson, British Columbia. Many of us are looking forward to seeing you there. And I wonder if there's something that you're looking forward to during that time, if there's something about the geography or the people or where you're at, something new that you've discovered that you're looking to sharing with us.
Well, I've never been to Canada, so that will be very, very exciting. Just being able to visit. It's been something I've wanted to do all of my life, and so to have this opportunity is fantastic. So just getting a chance to do that is, I'm just really looking forward to it. And also, it's always incredible to meet people, to hear the different stories of people's lives and what they're doing. And, I think a lot of times when I'm doing this work, I'm always looking from, this perspective where I'm looking at numbers and trends and statistics. And yet when I meet people, it's incredible because I get to hear what's going on in their communities. And so often there's incredible stories of hope and healing and people who are working really hard to feed their community and to heal the world. And so I love being able to visit with people and hearing those stories, because we do so much that, we don't have a chance to get to talk about those things because we're often so bombarded with those statistics. So I'm looking forward to meeting all of you and finding out about what you're up to.
Cool. The organizing team has invited communities of faith to host tables just to show pictures of what they've been doing. And I think we're finding that most communities of faith don't think what they're doing is that significant or significant enough to put a picture or whatever. But, parish hall ministries or soup kitchens or just getting together, I mean, these are radical undertakings that aren't being replaced by other institutions or organizations. And so there is significance, even though it doesn't feel like it sometimes.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, oftentimes the very boring parts of our jobs, whether we're starting a garden or like you said, a soup kitchen or a food pantry or whatever it is, these jobs aren't glamorous, right? They're not really exciting, but they do incredibly impact this world. And I think it's great to step back every once in a while and go, wow, you're helping children, or you're feeding people, or you're reaching out in your community in this really significant way. And we don't have a chance to tell those stories very often. So I'm thrilled that we'll be able to do that.
That's great. Yeah. Thanks. Well, I'm looking forward to meeting you in person. I know we're looking forward to having you in the Kootenays. And in the meantime, where can people find you on Twitter and Facebook and elsewhere?
I am on Twitter at Carol Howard, and I'm on Facebook. I'm a little bit more active on my regular page, which means you have to follow me because I think I'm at my friend limit or something. I don't know. Anyway, so just my regular personal page. It's on Facebook, and then I'm on Instagram. And I think if you just search Carol Howard Merritt, it's, I'll show up, I'm sure. So yeah, I'm usually somewhere there all the time. Most often on Twitter, though, I think.
Great. Well, thank you, and safe travels. And we'll see you in 10 days' time.
Great. I can't wait. Take care.